In the city of Dubai on the 4th of July 2003, there is an event happening at the American consulate. There, Claire Stenwick is approached by Ray Koval, demanding to know how long she plans to keep him waiting. He talks casually to her, as if they know each other, because he seems to be interested in her. He finally introduces himself to her, while she gives him a false name, Teresa. They both raise a toast to Independence Day, after which she makes it clear that she is not interested in him. He keeps hitting on her though, and eventually succeeds. He lies in bed, relieved, while she gets dressed and collects all the info she came here to collect. She checks to see that he has been poisoned properly and is unconscious before leaving. 2 planes are parked on the runway, ready to take off, when 2 associates fight each other with their subordinates standing behind them. One takes the other down, which causes the people behind them to finally intercept, instead of just standing by and watching. 5 years later, Ray and Dale are discussing the espionage patterns of Moscow, while also picking up on the fact that they are being followed by a guy who works for their rival company, Burkett and Randall. They resort to using Plan B to spot the guy, and deduce that he must be working with other people too. They take advantage of the busy streets of New York, and Ray leapfrogs out of the guy's sight. He uses a secret passage to transport himself to another part of the city and gets himself in position at Grand Central Station. There, he sees Claire and calls Dale to report the problem. He insists that they must reschedule the meeting, because their cover is blown. Dale doesn't listen to him because he is a beginner, but Ray exits the station and walks out on the road. He looks around, and Claire catches his eye as she is turning by a corner not so far away. Ray follows her and confronts her while they're inside a beauty store. He is surprised to see that she doesn't remember him at all, so he directly voices how she seduced him, slept with him, and then ransacked his hotel room. He explains how much he liked it, but she continues to play dumb and asks if she is being pranked on TV right now. She laughs in his face while he recalls how he spent the morning after being in an effort to trace her and find out who she is working for. When he says that she is working for the CIA, she conveys that she is done wasting her time, and walks away from him. He keeps pursuing her and eventually loses his patience, causing him to grab her by her hand while they're out on the street. Her bag falls on the pavement, and some of her belongings spread out on the street. He takes a look at them and shows his disappointment over the fact that she is the drop. She also breaks character and is upset about the fact that he's her contact. They later sit down, and she doesn't understand why he's acting like she owes him an apology. He was an assignment to her, he was an adult and knew what he was doing. She took advantage of his vulnerability and naivety to complete her mission. He has started working for her rival company now, and even though they're both spies, she refuses to work with him. She doesn't think he is competent enough to be her contact officer, but he argues that he has excelled everywhere he's worked. She isn't convinced, and wants Duke to assign someone else to her. Ray points out that he has worked in the field for 12 years, but that doesn't matter to Claire, as it's only been 3 weeks since he started working for Equicrom. This is nothing in comparison to her, who has been working in Burkett and Randall undercover as a mole. She is all the way in that company, and has made it to becoming their assistant director of counterintelligence. She makes it very clear that he is just the delivery boy for an asset. The only thing she gives him is a message for Duke, that she doesn't want to see him ever again. She is about to leave when he stops her, because he runs field agents for a living. He asserts his dominance and threatens her, reminding her that he owns her. He makes it known to her that he likes this job, and she needs to cooperate with him and not create any problems for him. If he gets replaced for any reason, he'll expose her to the company where she's working undercover. He demands her to deliver the package, which will be crucial for their boss, Duke. As she walks away from him, he urges her to apologize to him one last time. As she makes it to work the next day, she ties her hair up and gets to her office. Ray hands the package to Duke, who opens it with Pam. They cautiously pull out a handwritten letter, and Duke immediately calls Grassick at Equicrom. Claire continues to work her job undercover when her colleague gets a call. Mr. Tully is coming down, and wants the entire floor gathered in 5 minutes. Howard Tully writes a letter, which he folds and puts into his pocket. He looks out the glass from his office at a skyscraper opposite, where Richard works. Richard's assistant aide works him through the multiple commitments of the day, but he cancels it all. He goes to the parking lot, where his hired doppelganger is waiting for him. He sends his lookalike to sit in his car and be escorted out with protocol, while he himself gets in a mediocre vehicle and drives it. Ray's team is finalizing the details to take down Burkett and Randall for good when he notifies them of the red alarm blaring, signaling someone's entry. Richard calls Duke, because he is locked out of their hideaway again. He keeps assuring him that he's the only one who has this number, and since he's funding this whole operation, it'd be nice to have a code to remember to gain entry. He is finally brought inside, where Duke shows him Howard Tully's letter, retrieved by Claire. Meanwhile, she is in the meeting led by Howard, who is giving a speech about the rules being changed today. As Howard delivers his speech, Richard reads it from the retrieved letter and mocks it. The gist of the speech is that B&R is launching a new product that will bring them to the top of the market, and is a top company's secret right now. Richard is now deeply curious about what Howard has in store. Regardless of Duke's assurances, Richard's suspicion turns into fear and paranoia now, as he is sure that Howard will defeat him for good. Duke's whole unit has done their fair share of work to survey every move made by Howard. They know that this new product is coming from outside, and now they will study all the acquisitions of the company. They also have eyes on the division that handles all travel for the company, and is located in a building with low security. When Claire returns home that evening, she sits down by herself to have dinner, and hears a bell tolling in the distance. This brings back the memory of the day she was in Rome 2 years ago. Ray was also there on a date at that time. He spotted Claire walking down the street and followed her until he caught up to her. They had the same conversation that they had recently in the beauty store, with the exception of her giving in to his pestering eventually. She noticed that his knee was all better, as he wasn't wearing his knee brace anymore. She had apologized to him and shown remorse for taking advantage of him. She mentioned that she works for the CIA. This whole interaction wasn't satisfying at all for Ray, so she inquired what his idea of vengeance was. This led them to sleep together again, and stay holed up in a hotel room for 3 consecutive days. One day, a document is slipped into their room, and Ray receives it while Claire is still asleep. They have been engrossed in each other so much that they're behind on work. Claire just missed her flight and is running late, so she quickly gets dressed. Meanwhile, Ray points out that he blew off his work commitments too. She indirectly accuses him of sabotaging her wake-up call, and he is offended by the fact that she took assignments behind his back. As they both get dressed, he taunts her for what she did to him in Dubai. He now thinks that these 3 days were another assignment for her, and that she played him again. They are both disappointed in the lack of trust they have for each other. Claire thinks it's because of their profession, but Ray argues that it's just human nature to be careful. This fight thrills them both enough to keep doing this for the rest of their lives. But they'll need millions of dollars to ride off into the sunset together. So, they came up with just the right plan to do that. Right now, Duke is on a stakeout with Fadov, right outside B&R's travel building. This operation relies on Ray, who accidentally bumps into a woman at the bar, spilling her drink. He gets acquainted with her and lies that he grew up next to her hometown. She is Barbara Bofford, a senior executive for B&R's travel division. He gives her a false name and creates a scenario where she thinks that he has a travel problem. She takes him into her office, where he steals a glance at the security code to send it over to Duke. This allows them to gain access to all info from the travel building. Claire is having lunch when her colleague walks up to her. He mentions the recent security breach at their travel office, and she acts like she'll get working on it instantly. Ray is commended by his teammates for the incredible job that he did. Claire is in a meeting with her colleagues, who have snapshots of Ray and all the inappropriate things he did with Barbara. This makes Claire very uncomfortable, especially because her colleagues have caught on to the fact Ray is an Equicrom spy. They plan to interrogate Barbara and entrust Claire to conduct the interview. On the other hand, Duke's unit solves the mystery of what and where B&R's new product is. Consequently, they send some men down to Formavale Labs in Dunwoody, Georgia. Claire feels more unsettled when she watches Barbara cry, and recalls how Ray manipulated her and made her feel special. This gives Claire an idea of how she might also be one of the victims of Ray's charms, just like Barbara. Her mind goes back to the events of 18 months ago, when Ray arrived in London. They met each other excitedly because they had been severely missing each other for the last 2 months. He informs her that he finally quit his job, which she finds hard to believe. She goes on about how he's lying about quitting, which drives him to infer that she was asked to stay at her job and she obliged. He blames her for making him quit the only job he's ever had when she didn't quit her own, leaving him out in the cold. That's when she reveals that she followed up on her commitment and left her job, even though they begged her to stay. Fast forward to now, Ray pays a visit to the Formavale Labs site, which presumably worked in biotech. Meanwhile, Duke and Pam brief Richard on Ronnie Partis, who is the pioneer of Formavale. 3 days after he sold Formavale to B&R, 3 armored trucks showed up at his door, and he has been living an extravagant life ever since. He is staying over at Atlantis Hotel in the Bahamas, where Ray also sets up base in a room across from where Ronnie is staying. Ronnie now has constant eyes on him from both Ray and Claire, working on behalf of their companies under the supervision of their colleagues. Ray is sitting at the bar with Fadov, watching Ronnie gamble. He contemplates joining his expensive table, and is surprised to see Claire enter the room with her colleague. She spots him across the room, and that's exactly when the hotel's security team makes their way to Ray and Fadov. They ask to check their room keys, because they found some spying equipment in their rooms. It doesn't take Ray a lot of effort to figure out that Claire planted the devices in their room with her colleague to sabotage their stakeout. Claire and her colleague escort Ronnie out of the hotel to board him on a plane, while Ray and Fadov are apprehended by hotel security. On the plane, Claire and her colleague discuss that Ronnie might be Tully's secret weapon. Claire thinks about her meeting with Ray 14 months ago in Miami, a while after they both quit their jobs for the government. Claire had been paranoid that they were under surveillance, and very carefully drove to him. He has booked them a deluxe room, because he wants to celebrate the fact that he finally came up with the master plan to financially secure them for the rest of their lives. He brings her attention to the private companies that sell consumer goods. The competition among them is so strong that they hire spies to sabotage each other's operations, and they can take advantage of that. Ray is enthusiastically pitching his idea to her when she admits that she took a job yesterday, which is why she's been so paranoid. She obviously can't tell him about the job because it's classified information, but he calls her out for breaking their deal. They had decided to not do things on their own and run everything past each other because they plan to work together now. Ray has the idea of getting an espionage job at one of those private companies, while Claire can set up an exit strategy for them. She can get into the mix later, and they can see on the spot what optics they want to create for their employers. She tells him about how Equicrom in New York has hired her as a mole to work for them in B&R. This is way more major than the pizza company he wanted to work for in Cleveland. They both decided to play along and achieve what they'd planned all this time, even though seeing each other would be very tricky and dangerous for some time. In the present, Claire is called to Tully's office, where he shares his opinions about how critical it is to be the first and best to create something good. He commends her for the job she did well last night, and mentions that Pardes may seem a fool, but he will give B&R the tools to change their course forever. What he wants to know from her is whether she can continue doing this job without knowing the exact details of what they're developing. He is making sure that he can trust her to protect something she doesn't care about. Duke and Dale inform Ray that Claire wants to communicate with Richard, but they don't trust him to handle her. This is because they heard him when he confronted Claire about Dubai in the beauty store. They play the conversation for him, and he curses Claire in front of them for selling them this conversation. Duke explains that she didn't give them this. Ray had been wired the whole time, and that's how they know about him and Claire knowing each other from before. What Ray doesn't understand is why would they keep him on the team when they knew about his conflict of interest. He learns that they were beginning to doubt Claire and thought that she'd been with B&R for way too long, which is why they brought Ray in. But he turned out to be more than they expected, and managed to keep Claire on track. They applaud him for the way he asserted his dominance over Claire that day, and are fine with what has happened so far. But Claire doesn't need to know that they're aware of that day's events, and she can proceed to meet Richard as planned. Ray met Claire in Cleveland 3 months ago, at his apartment. She came here with great difficulty and caution to make him aware that Equicrom is looking to hire an agent on their special units team led by Duke. This is a wonderful opportunity for Ray to get the job, especially because she was being difficult on purpose, which is why Duke needs an agent in the first place. Both companies are in a war, and the product being developed is unknown. Each of them can play on both sides and make tons of money either way, depending on who gets to the product first. Ray doesn't disapprove of the idea at first, but it seems like he has settled in his job for the pizza company here. Claire isn't pleased about this, as she brings out a thong she found in his closet. He insists that he's been faithful to her, so it's impossible that she found those panties in his closet. He is disappointed that she doesn't trust him, even after everything that they've been through and all the justifications he has given to assure her of his loyalty to her. She smiles and jokes that she'll put the panties back on, as they were hers all along. He hates how she plays games with him, but found it thrilling at the same time too. Ray finally arranges the meeting for Claire and Richard at a bowling alley. Richard didn't expect her to be this beautiful, and bosses Ray around to get her some pizza, oblivious to the fact that Claire is enjoying all this. Ray watches Claire and Richard whisper to each other while he orders pizza for them. She leaves pretty soon, and that's when Ray comes back to Richard, who immediately wants to talk to Duke. Richard doesn't tell Ray about what Claire told him, but orders him to get a secure line with Duke, because he must talk to him during his flight to the stakeholders meeting. Ray obliges and calls Duke as soon as Richard leaves. He sees an object that Claire left behind for him, and goes to a secret location. There, he gathers his passports and money, but notices that Claire's passports and her share of the money are missing. She finds him waiting outside, and she confronts him about the fact that he was just about to leave without her. He reminds her that they vowed to never touch the Mayday pouch until it was time to bail. She questions how he trusted her, as he was just checking it now. She took her things from it right after she discovered that he slept with Barbara. He tries to convince her that it meant nothing to him, and was just an assignment. He is also upset at the fact that she won't disclose what she told Richard to him. It's clear that they still have trust issues and resentment between them because of how tumultuous their relationship has been, but they just need to be less emotional and more practical if they want to pull this off together. Their fight gets worse, and Claire decides to keep this strictly professional now. They'll still keep their cuts, because they invested 2 years in this operation, but they'll go their separate ways afterward, instead of riding off into the sunset together. She also shares with him the info that she told Richard. B&R has developed a cure for baldness with Pardes' help, which is huge and highly profitable. But she doesn't have the formula, which makes Ray doubt her more, as he thinks that she's holding out on him, or has some other secret partner she's in cahoots with. Claire is called back to her office on an urgent notice, where she witnesses her co-worker getting caught because he tried to steal the formula for B&R's new product. Claire sees the envelope, which hasn't been opened by anyone yet. Her boss leaves her with her co-worker and the formula alone, while he handles security protocols before calling this in. Claire's colleague tries to talk her into partnering up with him to steal the formula, but she tapes his eyes and mouth shut before taking away the formula with her. Ray gets a call from Claire telling him that they're good to go. He immediately rushes to his team and informs them that she's got the formula. They make arrangements to create a channel for her to send the formula over to them. After overcoming many obstacles, she sends over the formula to them in such a way that it can't be traced. Ray prints a copy for himself without his team knowing about it, while Claire makes it back to her colleague without getting caught. She later joins the party happening at the headquarters of the special unit, where everyone applauds her. Duke has already talked to Richard and locked the formula in a safe that he'll retrieve later, once he gets back from his stakeholders meeting. Claire and Ray fight in front of their team, because Claire has been burned now and has nowhere to go. She openly puts the blame on him, and causes everyone to doubt him, so that they would check whether he printed a copy of the formula. She walks out on the team, warning them not to trust Ray. His team searches him and finds a copy of the formula in a crumpled up piece of paper in his bag. Claire is at an airport in Zurich 12 hours later. She waits there for a long time while Richard attends his meeting in San Diego. Claire is about to board her flight when Ray finally walks up to her. It looks like their plan to fool Duke worked. She tells him that the Swiss buyer for their formula is waiting, and willing to pay them $35 million. They would get $17.5 million each. She finally lets her guard down, and confesses that she loves him. She knows that he might not trust her, but she still has a fantasy of them being in love like normal, honest, trusting people. He brings out his copy of the formula, and accepts that he loves her and thinks about her all the time too. Richard is about to step into his meeting when he learns that Tully is calling an emergency press conference tomorrow. He goes out and breaks the news of his new product to his shareholders. Meanwhile, Ray and Claire sell the formula to a Swiss company, only to find out that the formula is nothing but a simple skin cream. 10 days ago, Claire and Ray were rehearsing their first conversation to fool their teams, unaware that Tully was spying on them with Pam and Ronnie all along. He single-handedly fooled not only Claire and Ray, but Richard too. Ray and Claire feel defeated and impressed when Tully sends them a thank you champagne bottle, because he took down his lifelong rival through them. With no more complications and games in their relationship, all they have now is each other, and they're fine with that.